All right, everyone. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and start with chapter 11 here with local government. So let me share the screen here. Okay. Okay, here. So, local government is actually one of my favorite chapters to cover. And I also believe that it's one of the most important chapters um within this government 2306 class. And the reason why I say it's really important is because um in the federal government class, in government 2305, there really isn't too much mention of local government. There's not really too much focus on it, too much emphasis on it. It's barely mentioned throughout the book. I know this new textbook that we got, I think it does go over local government a little bit more, which is a good thing, because the previous textbook we had wasn't. So I'm in it's my first semester teaching with that book, so I'm still going through it and reading through the chapters and doing analysis and all that stuff. So there is more mention of it in the new government 2025 book we have, but for the old one, there wasn't really hardly any mention of it. So that's why I say to you all that I really do like this idea of having a chapter devoted to local government because local government gets overshadowed in terms of its impact when it comes to our daily interactions when we're talking about interacting with government in general, right? What I mean by this is that, if you think of who are you most likely to interact with in terms of a government official, are you going to interact more with a federal agent, like a federal, government official, or is it going to be more so a local government official? Who are you more likely going to be able to interact with and also have an easier chance to interact with? So if we think about this, now, of course, because we live on the border, we're in a little bit of a different situation because we do have a lot of federal involvement when it comes to DHS, right? Department of Homeland Security. We've got Border Patrol and Customs Border Protection, all that, because we live in a specialized part of the country. But for the most part, usually the only federal employee or that people will usually run into on a daily basis is probably their local postman, right? For people working in the post office, or maybe if you live like in Kansas, Nebraska, you might interact with some USDA agents, right? Or things like that. But for the most part, we don't really interact too much with the federal government. It's more so uh, the state more so to an extent, but even the state we don't interact with as much. Mostly because we don't live in the Texas capital. Now, if we lived in Austin, obviously, of course, we would interact with the state a lot more. And that's not to say that there isn't state involvement. I mean, of course, obviously, we have uh, countless state agencies, like we see, like DPS troopers, quite a bit here because again, we're on the border. So there's some state agents there as well. There's also, of course, interactions with other state agencies, depending on what line of work you might be in. Um, but for the most part, the point I'm trying to make is that on a typical day, we typically are more likely to run into local government officials, like, seeing your local policemen, police officers, conducting their patrols, right? Um, Running into, school district officials and things like that. Um, People that work for the city. If you have to go pay like a utility bill, like a water bill or things like that. Um, Also people that work for the city will do grounds work at parks, or they'll also check the meters at your houses. So you see how like do you all get what I'm saying? The point I'm trying to make is that local government unfortunately gets overshadowed, which is unfortunate because, like I said, if you think about it, in a typical day, local government tends to be the level of government that you tend to interact with the most and you tend to see the most, right? So that's my point is that local government doesn't get a lot of the credit that it should get in terms of its importance. And today and a day like today, which is also, because it's election day today, that's also an important note because you all notice that the presidential election gets so much attention. It's gotten so much media, just so much media hype. Um, there's just been that's what everyone's been talking about for a long time already. But yet, no one really talks about local elections that much. No one really talks about, whenever there's a mayoral election or whenever there's, things like that, right? Or city council, school board races don't really get the type of attention that the presidential election gets, even though technically you could make an argument that in our community, we are going to feel the decisions and the effects of local government elections more so than a presidential election. Because again, something like, how much property tax we're going to have to pay. How much are the schools going to be, collecting when it comes to property taxes? Those are actual things that we're actually going to feel in our pocketbooks, right? Not to say that we can't feel those things, when it comes to like federal, tax rates or things like that, because we obviously do feel that as well. But my point is that, people obviously they know about that in terms of tax rates set by the federal government. Well, a lot of people they don't really understand like, local taxes and things like. I mean, property taxes they do know because of how high they've been, which we'll definitely talk about that a little bit later in the class. But I just want to give you all some examples in terms of why I feel that local government doesn't get, the attention that it deserves. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started here. So okay, so with chapter 11. Okay, so by the end of this chapter, you should be able to describe the nature of county government in Texas and the relationship of counties to state government. So we are going to take a look at how that we are going to take a look at that interesting dynamic when it comes to state governments and the power that they have over, county governments, as well as also with city government as well. We are going to take a look at those interactions. But first off, what we're going to start off with here today is we're mostly going to focus on county government, and then on Thursday we'll focus on city government, and also we'll touch on a little bit of special districts as well here. But today is mostly going to be about county government. Discuss the nature of city government in Texas and the distinctions between home rule and general law cities among the forms of government, especially council manager and mayor council. So one thing that I do want to mention right now that we are going to discuss today and also on Thursday is that there is a major difference when it comes to how, when you compare county governments to city governments, how county governments are organized. They have a lot less leeway. They have a lot less. They have a lot less versatility. Well, not versatility, but they have a lot. County governments, they have to follow the same exact type of government setup across the state, whereas every county government in Texas is going to look exactly the same, where you have four precincts, where the county is divided up in four precincts, and you're going to have one county judge that oversees the entire county, right? So every county in Texas has that same type of administrative setup. Whereas with cities, as you can see, there's different types of cities, right? You got home rule cities, general law cities. You've also got different forms of city council governments here, right? And we're going to talk about what those types of city council governments are. But the point I want to make here is that counties don't have the ability to have a different setup when it comes to like their administrative setup as opposed to cities that do. And like I said, on Thursday, we're going to talk about what they are and what those differences are. Okay, then understand both the advantages and disadvantages of special district government in terms of democratic theory. So yeah, on Thursday, we will touch on special districts. Probably the most common special district that you all probably would be familiar with is a school district, because obviously, of course, that's the by far the most prevalent one and the most well known. And so we'll talk about what they are and why there are some issues when it comes to how special districts are constructed, and the lack of transparency with some of these more obscure districts like irrigation districts, which most people don't even know what they are or what they do. Even for people like us who study this stuff, it can be hard to find some of that information. So we'll discuss that on Thursday. Recognize the fiscal and other issues facing all local governments in Texas. We will talk about how that because local governments do not have the amount of money that comes into their into their they don't have the kind of money that the state and certainly not the federal government can generate. So they do have issues when it comes to adequately funding not just city and county services, but also paying their employees too. I mean, you definitely notice this. Like if any of y'all, because I try to notice this, like if let's say, um, if you're going to other parts of the state, and let's say you're going to more rural parts of the state, like one thing that I'll notice is what I look for. Let me give you an example. So what I look for, like let's say I'm going to like Brooks County or Jim Hogg County on the way to Laredo. And the thing that I would notice is I would notice that like in those counties that the police vehicles and just the county vehicles would be a lot older than vehicles over here like in Hidalgo County, because obviously they don't have the tax revenue coming in because nobody lives in those areas, so they can't afford brand new vehicles, right? Their employees aren't going to get paid as much when it comes to more affluent counties and things like that, right? So that is an issue where that because of the disparity of tax revenue coming in, that county governments and city governments as well are not able to there's going to be some disparity in terms of what they can afford and things like that. And then understand leadership in local governments. We're also going to talk about who tends to be successful when it comes to being a leader in local government. What is it that and we will talk about how um that for these positions in county and city governments that they are elected positions, although at the county level they are partisan elected positions where they do have to run as a member of a political party, whereas for mayoral races in Texas, they do not. So we'll talk about those differences. So I know there's a lot to unpack here, but we're gonna be focusing on that here for this week here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about um, what local government is and how it's become a lot more important. Well, not necessarily that it's become a lot more important, but uh, it's become a lot more specialized. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about in chapter 8, where we talked about how that that we started to see an increase in urbanization after World War II. Especially Texas is a great example of this, where we started to see cities like Houston, Dallas, San Antonio really start to take off in terms of growth. And then in more recent years, Austin has also caught up as well. There was a lack of city regional planning here, and of course that is still something that's a big issue that cities do wrestle with today when it comes to expansion and and you see and things like how fast the city's going to grow, and making sure that if a city is going to be expanding out that they're able to have some control in terms of those local areas outside the city. So we're going to talk about like annexation and all that stuff, and how and what some of those problems are. But yeah, but we see this, right? We see where if and this isn't just for cities, right? This is just when a population grows too fast, it's going to be difficult for the infrastructure to keep up. So a good example of this, of course, as we might know locally here, is a lot of the construction that's been going on in the expressways here with Interstate 2. Of course, as we all know, like Expressway 83, right? So obviously, of course, and this is more so, for local discussion here. But it's just interesting to see this, right? So the point how this trickles back to discussing in terms of how cities started to become larger was because they were growing too fast, and they just didn't have the ability to be able to properly plan this out. That's why you see a lot of issues when it comes to highway construction, and where there's just endless construction in Texas. I'm sure some of you have seen those memes, right? Like it's just a never ending construction because the population is just growing too fast for the infrastructure to keep up. So that's just the nature of it, unfortunately. I guess people just have to be patient and things like that. But it's just something I've already accepted I guess that's just the cost of progress in Texas. That I certainly would rather have that than I guess losing population and losing services. So, but it is what it is. Now let's talk about Dylan's rule. This is something that is a big deal, but a lot of people don't really. I feel that a lot of people kind of underestimate Dylan's rule in terms of the impact that it has on local government. But let me break this down to you, because this is very important when it comes to democratic theory here. Now, Dillon's rule is the mandate that local governments are creations of state governments and their powers and responsibilities are defined and can be limited by the state. Now, in federal government 2305, in the first chapter, we talk about different forms of government. We talk about um, so the form of government that we have here in the United States is a federalist system where you have a separation of responsibilities between the state and the federal government. What we mean by this is the federal government does not control everything. The federal government does not necessarily tell states what to do. Like a great example I like to say is that President Joe Biden cannot tell Governor Greg Abbott what to do, right? Because they are not in the same organizational chart, right? They're not even in the same governmental level. So that's the type of system that we have when it comes to, the interactions between the federal government and the states, where there is that separation. When it comes to interactions between the state and local governments, there isn't as much of that separation. And that's what Dylan's rule is saying, is that state governments can tell local governments what to do in a lot of different areas. Here's an example. So you all know how, like, if you all remember, like, from your high school days, like, do you all remember, like, when you all had to take those state tests, and everyone was always worried about those tests, and all the teachers were stressed out, and everyone was just like, oh, we gotta, we have to do good on the STAR test and all that stuff. Well, that's not a creation of the local school district. That is a mandate from the state, from the Texas Education Agency, which outlines that school districts have to meet certain standards. The school districts cannot tell the TEA, you know what, we're going to opt out of the state testing. No, we don't agree with the state testing. We're not going to go. No, they obviously can't do that or else they'll get shut down. We've seen in the last couple of years where the state has taken over certain school districts, like Houston ISD, the largest school district in the entire state, is under the control of TEA right now because of Dillon's rule. This is not something that would happen where the federal government would go and take over like state like that, right? There are a few exceptions where sometimes the FBI will go and they will go, like when it comes to like local police departments, they can go and they can administer them. So there are a few exceptions to this, but for the most part, the federal government doesn't go in and take over state operations, right? But with Dillon's rule, the state does have a lot more authority to take over local government operations and things like that. So just keep that in mind and that has become a contentious issue in Texas, conservative state versus liberal cities. There's been several of these types of battles where a more progressive city council wants to push forth for more liberal agendas, but then the state will step in and block those agendas. Like a couple of examples have been, I know several years ago, the city of Austin wanted to raise the minimum wage in the city. They wanted to raise that to, I believe, 15 an hour. This was several years ago, and the state basically stopped them, where the state said no, that the city does not have the authority to set a minimum wage within the city, because it would have only applied to the city of Austin, right? Where anybody working within this Austin city limits would have to, any businesses, right, would have to pay at least $15 an hour. So the state put a stop to that. Another example was a couple of years ago, there were some cities that were also banning plastic bag sales at grocery stores. I'll never forget that about 10 years ago, when I temporarily moved to Laredo, when I was first studying at TAMU, that that when I went to the HEB there in Laredo, um, I didn't know that Laredo had implemented a uh, a plastic bag ban. So when they were checking me out, I was thinking to myself, because I didn't see any bags, I didn't see that they were putting any bags, and then I was like, then I realized, oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, so Laredo is, and then I checked online. I was like, okay, yeah, I was right. Yeah, Laredo was one of those cities that had banned plastic bags. Now, what I remember about that is that I remember that I still had some plastic bags from HEB from here in the valley. So I went to my car and then I went and batched them myself from Valley plastic bags and things like that. Which I always try to recycle those plastic bags. Like I try to use them like for things around the house, like for my own like trash bins here and things like that. So I do use them. I don't throw them away. I do use them. I mean, I try to limit them as much as possible. But at the same time, I just want to share that story that, yeah, that the state then put a stop to that, where the state did say that cities cannot go and make those types of decisions. One last example, we also saw this at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, where um, in particular there were some fights between, well, not like literal fights, but there were political fights between Governor Greg Abbott and Hidalgo County, I'm not saying Harris County judge over in Houston. They all start with H. Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, where she was trying to implement stronger COVID protections, but Governor Greg Abbott said no, that that's his authority to decide what those COVID protections would be. So that was also a big fight that we saw a couple of years ago. And of course, the phrase "all politics is local" is an important phrase in American politics. It basically discusses um, that the politics have to start from somewhere, right? That national issues have to have these local roots because they have to start from an issue that is happening within someone's community. At least for a lot of these politics, right now. That's not to say that there aren't also other politics that don't stem from local things, like foreign policy issues or things like that. But for the most part, most of these issues that Americans definitely tend to care about do tend to start at the local level, and it is local people that vote in these elections, right? That this presidential election that's happening today um, is also a local election because counties are the levels of government that administer elections. So we're going to talk about that here right now. Anyway, okay, so let's take a look at this one size fits all notion about county government because again, this is definitely something that we're gonna talk about how this tends to be somewhat controversial and how a lot of political scientists tend to see this as an issue. I know the book is very critical of this type of setup here in terms of its inflexibility, but we're gonna talk about that right now. Excuse me. Sorry about that. We're gonna talk about that right now as we continue. So historical and legal background. So Texas has the largest number of counties in the country with 254 here. And so I'm not going to pretend like I've driven through every county in Texas because I haven't, not even close. But I have driven through a lot of a lot of parts, different parts of the state. I have gone through the Texas Panhandle. I have gone through, East Texas and the Piney Woods and places in between. The only area I haven't gone to yet is the El Paso area, so that does need to be next on my list. But for the most part, I have gone through a lot of these different areas, especially from the Panhandle down to San Antonio. That was a very interesting trip because I basically went, I pretty much traversed through one of the most rural parts of the state, right? It was definitely a very interesting trip. So I'm glad I took it. This was back, not this past summer, but the summer of 2023, because I was looking at a trailer in Lubbock. So I wanted to go and take a look at that. But anyway, it is what it is. So let's talk about empty space politics because I'm going somewhere when it comes to this discussion of a lot of the rural areas of the state. Um, so we've talked about how that even though Texas has become a lot more urbanized, where it's the second largest population in the entire country in terms of number of people living within a state, but a lot of that is concentrated within the Texas Triangle, right? Within the San Antonio Austin I-35 corridor going up to the DFW Metroplex, and then on down to 45 to Houston Metro, and then going back to San Antonio, right? So most of the state's population is within that Texas Triangle. Now, of course, we locally we live outside of that, so and I've said before that the Valley is the fourth largest metropolitan area in the state outside of those three areas. So I've said that that's pretty cool that we have become the fourth largest metropolitan area. But with that being said, um, we still see that there is a ton of area within the state that is very sparsely populated. And so that's where local government comes in, right? And you could even make an argument that local government is probably not that it's necessarily even more important in rural areas, but it's definitely more prevalent and it definitely has more of an influence within the community, right? If you've ever been to a small county, like I know Stark County, it's not that small, but it's definitely a lot smaller than Allen County. I spent a lot of time over there because that's where all my family's from. You can definitely tell that it's got a different feel where um, it's more based on there's going to be more influence on the local government control here. And that's what it's talking about, where it's empty space politics, where the county government is a dominant force in rural areas, but lacks the flexibility to accommodate urban problems, especially as a county becomes more urbanized. Stark County is a good example of that because they've gotten a lot more urbanized in the last couple of years, where Rio Grande City has grown a lot, where they have a lot more businesses. So they have been successful in that regard, but it still becomes a problem because the counties are inflexible when it comes to being able to accommodate those types. What I mean, what's talking about here is that like the city kind of has to take the lead when it comes to those urban development issues. It's not really the county that does. So the county does have a role, but it's more so the cities that are the ones that kind of have to take the lead on that. Counties continue to handle judicial business of the state, collect state taxes, and administer elections. Right. So let's talk a little bit about also what why counties exist in the first place, especially in a massively large state like Texas. What I want for you all to understand about this is that because Texas is so large, that there was no way that you were going to be able to have people from all over the state have to go to Austin for everything. Because again, Texas now, thankfully, Austin is located towards the middle of the state. So it's equidistant from a lot of these different places, but even like far away places like Amarillo or far away places like down here in the valley, it would still take forever to get to Austin. If we're thinking of, going back to the 1800s, it takes forever to get to Austin even now. It's about a 5 hour, it's about a 5 hour drive to get there, and then it's an hour to get through Austin. So it's funny, right? Because yeah, I'm trying to be funny about the traffic in Austin, right? So you got to add an extra hour, just to get through Austin once you're there. But the point is that it's still, it's still very far away. So counties were developed as a means to bring the state government to the locals, basically, where you could conduct state business here, such as, and we'll talk about some of those roles that the county fills when it comes to record keeping, when it comes to, marriage licenses, death certificates, deeds to housing properties and things like that. There are tons of county records that do have state implications, uh, but it's not something that has to be done only within the state capital, right? So it's a way to kind of bring the state capital down to the local people. Um, and again, obviously, of course, they're also responsible for, collecting those, state taxes when it comes to, and of course, cities also play a role in this when it comes to like, sales taxes and things like that. But yeah, obviously, of course, counties are responsible for, the collection of property taxes as well. And of course, they also administer elections, like we mentioned before. And next week, we're going to get more into elections of political parties, which is unfortunate because I know we have the election going on today. But I guess we can still talk about it because obviously, of course, like I said at the beginning of class, I don't think we're going to know who the president's going to be. Maybe not until next week. So so that could be still a good segue for us to to be talking about some of these like talking about political parties as well as the state elections and all that stuff. But yeah, but the point here is that for counties, the counties are the ones who are responsible for administering elections. What we mean by this is that every county is going to have a I don't think I've talked about this here in this class. It was in federal government that I talked about it last week. Every county has their own elections department. Okay, so for here to that county, it's the Hidalgo County Elections Department. They are responsible for what we mean by administering elections. What they do is that they are responsible for um, setting up polling locations. They're responsible for hiring poll workers, the ones who when you check in and show your ID. They're responsible for setting up the voting machine kiosks, which isn't that's not a requirement in every county. It depends on how much revenue the county is bringing in. So more, so bigger counties like Hidalgo County, Harris County, Tarrant County over there, like in the Dallas area, they of course obviously are going to have a lot more money to spend on their elections, so they can afford to have those voting kiosk machines. Whereas in a more rural county, they might still be using the paper ballots because that's just a lot cheaper, and that's totally okay because it's up to the county to decide how they're going to set up the ballot. So I'm telling you that presidential elections are local elections because the counties are the ones who decide how the ballots, how the form of the ballots, right? Not who's going to be on the ballot, but the format of it, right? In terms of the setup here. And then counties are creation of state governments, but have substantial discretion. So even though the way they're set up is inflexible, they do have discretion when it comes to how the money that they collect is spent. We will talk about how I'm going to show you all a couple of charts here from the Texas Comptroller's Office that shows how different counties have different tax rates and how that money is spent. It's mostly spent on roads and construction. Um, but again, counties do have so the point I want to make is that the counties don't have flexibility when it comes to how their government is set up, but they do have flexibility when it comes to how the money that they raise is able to be spent. So just do keep that in mind. Okay, now let's go ahead and go to organization and operation of county government. Now the structure of county government is what is called the commissioner's court. Okay, the commissioner's court, as I'm going to show you all here, as you can see here in this chart, and we're going to go over all this here right now. The commissioner's court is set up in that you have four county commissioners, and then you have a county judge, and the four county commissioners come from four different precincts here, right? Um, you know what? There was one more thing I forgot to mention here. Let me stop the share, and let me pull up something else that I want to show it to you all really quickly. Let me show you all the since we're talking about the commissioner's court. Let me show you all the um, Hidalgo County precinct map for the county here. Let me show this to you all really quickly, um, so that you all can get a sense for what this looks like here. Okay, let me see. I think this is. Let me click on this here. Or you know what? Let me show this to the both. Let me show both of these here because I want to show you all the county website here where you can find this as well as the actual map here. So let me go ahead and show this to you as it loads. So let me go ahead and go back to sharing my screen here, and that way you all can see what this looks like here. So it's taking a little bit of time to load. So sorry about that. Hold on, let me go back to the Zoom here really quickly. Let's see. Okay, share. Okay. Or let's see. I think it's almost done loading here. Let me see. Okay, so it's okay. So let me go ahead and now I'm going to share both of these here. So let me go and do that really quickly. Okay. Okay, everyone. So this is the Hidalgo County website here, and this section that we're in discusses the maps of the four precincts here within Hidalgo County, right? So I mentioned that every county in the state of Texas is going to look like this, where you're going to have one county judge and four county commissioners, right? So it reads here, right? The county is divided into four precincts and is overseen by five elected officials. Each precinct is served by a commissioner. Together with the county judge, they comprise the commissioner's court, which oversee and govern county business. County judge presides over the commissioner's court and serves as the county administrator, right? So again, so these are the four county commissioners here within Hidalgo County, and I'm going to show you all the map here, right? So so this let me go ahead and zoom out here, okay? Now, like I said, this definitely takes a long time to load, so just kind of bear with me on this. But what I want to show you all here is that I also want to show you all how the county is set up in terms of the way that these precincts look like. And I'm sorry that this is taking forever to load because I wanted to show you all the way the lines are set up. Because the way the lines are set up is extremely important. And we're going to talk about this here in a bit that the counties do have to set these lines up not in a random fashion, but they do have to set them up in a way where you have an equal part of the population being distributed, amongst the four precincts here. So this is taking a little bit longer than I would have liked here because it's just showing the top here, where it just shows precinct four. But obviously, of course, it's just supposed to show a lot more here during this here in the city. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and then we'll see if we can we'll see if it comes back here and then once it loads, I can show it to you all again. Okay, man. So the commissioners' court, like we said, it's comprised of the four county commissioners and the county judge that proceeds over them. And of course, we have these have these different positions here, right? So let's talk about this, and then we'll go back to the positions here. Right? So I just want to show you all the map here. I'm not sorry, the map, but the chart here in terms of the organizational chart here. And as you can see here, like I mentioned, most of the responsibilities where it comes to county government is road construction within counties, but there are also other positions that we're going to be taking a look at here. We are going to take a look at the reason why these are listed over here is because these are elected positions here. But like I said, we're going to talk about that here in a bit. But let's go ahead and discuss more of the commissioners court. So we do have the absence of home rule, like I mentioned, that is just for cities where counties do not have the authority to deviate from this setup where every county in Texas has to look the same, where you have your four county commissioners and your county judge. There is, so again, uniformity in county organization, like I mentioned, partisan elections for county judge, four county commissioners, and other officials. So what this means here is that for these elected officials, and this is a listing of the elected officials here, along with the county commissioners and the county judge, all of these positions require for candidates to run as members of political parties, which we're going to talk about political parties next week. And so that'll be a good segue, to where we're going to talk about them next week, in terms of political parties within Texas. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap with federal government, but we're also going to focus more on how political parties operate at the state and local level. But anyway, with that being said, all of these positions here, these are elected positions, and so they have to run as members of political parties, as well as the county commissioners and the county judge. So if any of y'all have voted in this current election, you'll notice that there were a couple of county elections, such as for sheriff, right? Where you did have a Republican and a Democrat running against each other. So anyway, um, that's the way that works, right? And then we're going to go into detail in terms of these different positions here. But right, but just keep in mind that for those county elections that they do have to run as members of political parties in Texas. And then the county judge is selected in an at-large election. So what we mean by this is that when the county judge is running for election, everybody in the county that is registered to vote in Hidalgo County or any county wherever you live, they will be eligible to vote in that county judge election, right? So I can't go vote in the county judge election for Harris County, right? Because I don't live in Harris County. I'm not registered to vote in Harris County. Even if, like, let's say someone has a house over there, like it depends on where you're registered to vote, right? Um, so you can only be registered to vote in one place, right? You can't register in multiple places. So it's so based on who is registered to vote in what county, that'll determine which elections you can vote in. And so if you are registered to vote in that particular county, and if there is a county judge election coming up, then you can vote in that county judge election, as long as it's only confined to people that are living in that county and are registered to vote in that county. Now, for the commissioners, that's not a countywide election because that is just based on the precinct. So let me stop share again. Let me see if that's loaded here again. I want to see if the map has loaded. Okay, perfect. It has loaded finally. Okay, so let me kind of transition back here to the map here. Okay, all right, so good. So we were talking about how that for the county judge, they can vote, anyone that lives in the county and is registered in the county can vote for the county judge. But for county commissioner, it's only based on what precinct you live in, right? So if there's an election for precinct one over here in the Westlaco Mercedes, in this part of the county, then only people who are living and registered to vote in this part of the county can vote in that precinct one election, right? So I live over here in precinct three because I live in the Mission area. So I can't vote in a precinct one election because that's not my precinct, right? So I can only vote when it comes to county commissioner. I can only vote for precinct three. And like I said, so the reason why I wanted to show this to y'all is because notice that the lines are the borders here between precinct one, precinct three, precinct two down here, and precinct four up here. Notice that they all kind of converge here in this area, right? That this is where a lot of the boundaries are. And there's a very simple explanation for this. Because all of these precincts have to be somewhat equal in population. Just like for US House seats, they have to try to be, around 700,000. The four precincts have to try to be as evenly populated as possible within reason. Oh, also notice that it has the names here, and of course, Sir Richard Cortez, of course, is the county judge here for Hidalgo County. So within reason, right? So that's why you can't just have one precinct just be this area right here, because the reason why the borders are around here is because this is the most highly populated area in the county, right? Where you have Edinburgh, McAllen, Mission, then of course you have Far over here, right? This is the epicenter of the population within the county. Not to say that there's also another other pockets over here along 83, but this area right here, this is the largest populated area of the county. So you can't just make this one precinct because then, I mean, that just wouldn't be fair, right? Because who would want to be the county judge of this precinct? Because then you'd have so much more work to do, right? So they try to make it to where, okay, precinct three has a portion of this. They've got the western portion of that of this metropolitan area. Uh, Precinct four has the northern part. Precinct two has the southern part, and precinct one has the eastern part, right? And things like that. So they try to make it that way, and depending on which county you're living in, the lines will also be similar to where the borders will be near like the major metropolitan area of the county, right? So because they want to try to make sure that the population is the is the is pretty much similar, right? So I just want to show that that's y'all really quickly. Okay, so let's go back here. I know there's a way to just transition without having to stop the share, but I just want to make sure that it's still like sharing for y'all. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. And that also leads us to what I was just explaining, right? That the when it comes to organization and operation of county government, let's see, where was it? Here it is, right? That we were talking about apportionment right now, right? We're talking about that the districts have to be pretty much evenly populated, right? Because originally a lot of these county districts, and not just county, but also just election districts in general in this country were gerrymandered. Um, and we've talked about this a little bit before, where district lines were drawn, uh, for political advantages, right? And so previously, um, county lines were determined by county road mileage rather than population, right? So it was based on infrastructure here, but this changed in one of these cases, Avery versus Midland County. Um, and this, of course, was based on an earlier case called Baker v. Carr, where the one person, one vote rule came in. Baker v. Carr was an important case because it basically created this notion that districts have to be even when it comes to population. It has to be based on population because it's not fair for someone's vote to count more in a precinct where there's not as many people, um, as opposed to like a precinct where there's a lot more people, so your vote kind of gets washed out because it becomes more diluted. And that's also one of the issues that's going on right now when we're talking about the electoral college and how states have a lot of power when it comes to electoral college. So some people have made the argument about the one person, one vote thing, which again, I don't want to get into that because that's we could be here, forever on that, there's definitely a lot of consternation about that. Anyway, so county commissioner, of course, drew, the county commissioners, of course, are responsible for drawing the county precinct lines, and of course, this is based on population, right? Where the precincts do have to be somewhat equal in population here. Okay, let's talk about the commissioners court here a bit. So I know we're almost running out of time here, so let's go ahead and get to this here. So I know we have like a little bit more to do. Yeah, we'll see how much more we can get to this. So I definitely want for us to talk about the commissioners court and then these positions and then also the partisanship here. So let's kind of go through this really quickly. Okay, so the organization, operation, and county government. So the commissioners court, um, it's more like a city council than a court, right? It's not necessarily which makes it even more confusing because the leader of the commissioners court is the county judge who isn't really a judge either. Not to say that they aren't judges, but their roles are more so like a mayor or a governor or a chief administrator as opposed to uh someone who's trying to oversee court rulings, things like that. I don't know if that makes sense in terms of, so when I say that it's not really a court or they're not really a judge, I'm not trying to uh, minimize their title or minimize what they do. I'm just saying that their job description feels more like a chief administrator as opposed to a judge. Again, it's similar to how like lieutenant governor is really more like a Senate majority leader than uh an actual executive, right? They're more of a legislator, so to speak, right? And things like that. So it's kind of a similar thing where the county judge is more so like a mayor as opposed to like like a judge presiding over a case of so to speak. But let's take a look at the responsibilities of the commissioner's court. So again, they set the tax rate for the county, right? So different counties in the state will have different tax rates. So let me show you again really quickly. Let me show you all this. Let me show you this website to just show you all to give you all an example of that. The where was it? Okay, okay. Yeah, because let me go to the comptroller's office so that you all can see this here really quickly. So um let me see this. Okay, yeah, let me show like, and this is just going to be very quick, just to show you all as a quick example. Um, so this is from the state comptroller's office, where it says cities by county sales and use tax comparison. So again, don't really worry too much about the overall numbers. I just want you all to see that notice how that there are different tax rates within these different counties in Texas. Now, as you can see, the difference is not that much, right? You're not really seeing like a wide range of tax rates. It's just between 1 to 2%, right? But that 1 to 2% can make a difference when it comes to how much tax revenue comes in, right? But I just want to show that, and again, don't really worry too much about the numbers here. And this is just, you could go through a list in terms of all the different counties, um, like let's see if we have time to find like the Dollar County tax. Yeah, we can go through this really quickly. But this just goes to show you just how many counties in Texas there are. There's just way too many. So if we go to Hidalgo, let's see, it's taking us a while. Let's see, Harris, bunches of, but as you can see here, and as you can see, even cities have different tax rates within the counties, right? So yeah, so again, we're going to talk about this here a little bit later on here, but let's go ahead and go back to the share here. Okay. Um, they also exercise discretion in administration of state programs because counties do, like we said before, counties are responsible for the administration of state programs and state initiatives, as well as funding that the state will provide to counties. So the state isn't really as strict in terms of, you know, in terms of overseeing like how a lot of this everyday money is spent. Some people would probably make an argument that the state should have a little bit more discretion because unfortunately there have been instances where county government has engaged in and this isn't just here locally but across the state where county government has engaged in maybe some impropriety of funds or things like that, because there's not as much oversight here. But yeah, but the counties do have discretion when it comes to how this money is spent a lot of ways. Most important, of course, is setting the county budget in terms of what the county is going to be spending their money on. And as I mentioned, of course, larger counties are going to have larger pies to work with because of more money coming in. Uh, Responsible for running elections, like we talked about before. Every county has their own elections department, and they decide how the elections are going to be run, and then determines district lines for other elections, such as like for the book talks about how just of the peace precincts. The county also determines for the different precincts when it comes to like precinct chairs for political parties and all that stuff. And I think I've shared with you all before. That's the main reason why I'm no longer a precinct chair because after the census, the lines were redrawn because of population changes. So yeah, so they can also change for other elections here as well. Okay, so really quickly, let's kind of run through these positions here, and then I think that that's probably going to take us to the end of today, and then we can try to touch on a little bit of this next time here. But I do also want for us to get to city government as well as some more of these special districts. So we'll try to do our best on Thursday here. So let's kind of run through the positions here, then we'll end for today. So county officials. Okay, so we talked about the county commissioners, county judge. The county sheriff, of course, is the top law enforcement official when it comes to the when it comes to county law enforcement, right? So the sheriff is in charge of county constables and county deputies, right? I think you all are familiar, right? That counties also have law enforcement operations, right? In fact, in some counties in Texas, that's the only local law enforcement that you see, because there are some counties in Texas where they don't even have official cities. Um, the Zapata County, which is just to the north of Starr County, it's just to the north of us in the Valley. That is a good example of this because they are a county where they don't actually have an official city government. Where because the Zapata is actually not technically a city. It's they don't have an official city government. It's just the county that runs the entire county, and so it's just a population center, but it's not an official city because they don't have a mayor, they don't have a city council. So it's called a census designated place. So it's not technically a city. And a good way to know this is a good clue to know if like a community is a city or just a census designated place is when you see the green sign where it says like the location, if it doesn't say a population number under the sign, then that's a clue that it's not an actual city. It's just a census designated place. So in some of those locations, even where it's a big community, it's still administered by the county, right? So again, I know I'm kind of going a little bit off track here, but the county sheriff, of course, is the top law enforcement official, and they oversee county law enforcement. They also oversee the county jail as well. So they're also responsible for housing people who have been arrested and are awaiting trial. And then of course they also transport them over, to go and see the judge at the county courthouse, right? Because every county does have a county courthouse, which is the that is basically the administrative, the chief administration building for the county. And every county also has what's called a county seat, basically like a county capital. So in Hidalgo County, Edinburgh is the county seat, right? So that's where the courthouse is, and that's where the chief administrative operations of the county, happen. And that's where you'll see a lot of these positions. Not the county sheriff because they're over there at the county jail, but a lot of these positions are going to be at the county courthouse, at the county clerk, which is basically the top record keeper. They're responsible for all of those major county documents, such as, like I mentioned, the birth certificates, death certificates, deeds of homes. That's they're basically the top. I guess you could say paper pusher, right? That's kind of but they're basically in charge of the county documents. There's also the tax assessor, which collects the county taxes, and so they collect taxes on behalf of not just the county but also other tax, collecting also tax. The term for this is taxing agents, right? Such as the school district. So you don't so when you pay your property taxes, and those are coming up here at the end of January, you're not paying directly to the school districts, right? The school districts will go and make those property tax assessment requests in conjunction with the appraisal district. That's not a county agency. That's actually a state age. That's actually a state operation. These are the people that go and praise your home for its value, and they generate a tax bill based on how much your home is valued. And of course, also then the school districts also they can also go and make those tax requests and things like that, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that the county tax assessor is the one who does all that work in terms of where you pay them. They're the ones who collect the money. Just the piece like we mentioned in the previous chapter, of course, these of course are your local judges that deal with more routine civil and criminal matters. The county treasurer, of course, is responsible for overseeing the tax assessor collects the money, but the county treasurer is the one who is accountable for it. They're the ones who are keeping track of it, and they are the ones who are, generating reports on the, basically overseeing, um, making sure that the money is being accounted for and things like that. County school superintendent. This is in not really in more populated counties. Again, this is more like in rural counties. Again, I use a lot of these counties more towards the Laredo area because I'm very familiar with those areas. So you'll see like, Zapata County school district, because it's not based on a city, it's based on the entire county. Or in some cases, you'll have other, and what we mean by this is that there'll be other communities that will be part of that school district. So another good example of this is the Webb County CISD, because that is comprised of several different communities, like small towns like Bruni, Oilton, Mirando City. Those are combined to form the Webb County. Because originally they used to have their own school districts. Like I know my mother mentioned that when she was younger and she went to high school, she used to play volleyball against Miranda City. So they were their own school district, many years ago, but then they decided to pull their resources together and consolidate, which is no different than what we see like here locally with PSJA, right? Where you got Farsan and Alamo, where they also have uh, combined, to form their own district. But yeah, in more rural counties, you'll see uh, there'll be a county school district, and so you'll have a county school superintendent that oversees the uh, the school district for the entire county. Again, more so in smaller counties. County elections coordinator in larger counties, again, and again, they have different names. Some of them are called, the county elections, director, things like that. But basically, they're in charge of the elections department. Auditor and populations over 35,000. So an auditor is supposed to work in conjunction with the county treasurer to ensure. So the county treasurer basically keeps tabs of the money, but the auditor then goes even further and ensures that the money is being spent the way it's supposed to be. That the treasurer keeps track of the money. The auditor then goes and ensures that the money is actually being spent appropriately. County health officer. We saw a lot of this, a lot more when COVID first started, where we would have those updates from the county health officer. Basically, this would basically be like a medical doctor, someone who is obviously well versed in health, health in health affairs, and so the county will then designate them as the health officer to give guidance to the county when it comes to health. Um, and that's another thing also that counties also administer is that they also administer health clinics as well here. So some of y'all may be familiar with some of these local clinics that the counties also operate here. So that's another program that the counties also provide funding for, not in terms of these county health clinics as well. There's also in some of these more rural counties, you'll also have county agricultural agents and home demonstration agents. This is not every county has these. These are more specialized. These mostly deal with like um, expansion of when it comes to like build when it comes to home building, especially like in rural areas and agricultural operations and farms and things like that. So they just assist with overseeing those types of operations, things like that. So that's a little bit more specialized, and not every county has those. So okay, so we're going to end here for today because I know it's already time. So let me go ahead and stop the share here, and let me stop the record. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop the record here. So